It's so nice to see you here, and you are really on the cutting edge of a really big trend in remote work and freelancing. And I hope this session will be valuable to you. One of the things that really excites me is how well positioned freelancers have proved to be in the pandemic. A lot of the ways that we work and have always worked are remote, and we're going to be more and more useful in the future, I think, to all different types of clients who may not even know that much about how to remote work successfully. I think we've seen a lot of big companies kind of have a learning curve. Meanwhile, we were showing them how to do things, and so we're very valuable to them. Um, One of the areas I'm kind of a geek about freelancing statistics. I love looking at them, and in the US, there's probably a different name for this group of workers in every country, but they're called non-employer businesses, meaning they didn't create jobs. And I don't like that name because I feel like they're just as valid as businesses as somebody who did create jobs. And they are actually the vast majority of businesses in the world are one person businesses. Um, and one of the really exciting things this year, we get the data 2 years out, so it's for 2018, but the US Census, which is kind of a mirror for what's going on around the world with freelancing, found that professional services was the top category for high revenue, seven-figure businesses. So it's professional, scientific, and technical services. For the first time ever, we got to, this is a needle in a haystack. There in the US, there are 26.5 million of these non-employer firms, and 41,666 hit seven figures. So these are the Olympians of the one-person business, and they're the exceptions, but I think we can all learn from them. And just like with the 4 minute mile, people didn't think that it could be done until Jesse Owen. If we all raise the bar for ourselves and realize what the potential is for these businesses, maybe if someone is at 50,000, they can get to 100,000 and stop there because that's all they need. You don't have to have seven figures to have a happy life. It really depends on what the cost of living is for you and your responsibilities to dependents, if you have any. Um, but it does help us see the potential for what we can do. And I was really excited that the number one category was professional services, because people sort of berate us for selling hours, right? Like for trading time for dollars, and say that's a bad business model. But what's been happening is new models are evolving. It's never really that good to bill yourself out by the hour because you run out of hours, unless you can bill yourself out at $1,000 an hour, like some of the high-end computer programmers. But what you can do is think creatively about the value of your services. This is what I found. I recently updated the $1 million one person business to see what was going on with entrepreneurs in the book, and add some new case studies in professional services. And one really interesting thing I saw was commission-based pricing. One entrepreneur, Steve Ferreira, runs something called Ocean Audit, and he's in this field that he's been in his whole career. He's 59 years old. And what he did all these years was he audited the bills that if a department store ordered thousands of shirts, for instance, to put on the floor of the store from overseas, the shipping company would have a bill for that. And they make a lot of mistakes, and the mistakes are really big. They're like $250,000 mistakes. So he could have billed himself out and said, I charge $1,000 an hour to find these mistakes. But instead, he had a stroke of brilliance. And what he does is he tells the company, I have identified a $250,000 mistake. I will tell you what it is and collect it for you, but I keep 50%. So he is a father who lives in Connecticut. He's got three kids. He works from a co-working space. He brings in almost $2 million a year because he didn't go with the conventional wisdom about his pricing. And I thought, wow, this is blowing my mind. He really rethought the whole business model in his industry. And so many of us undervalue what we provide, but what's easy for us is hard for others. Not everybody can find those mistakes. He spent his whole career in this field, and I think he's a great example for people that are in their 40s and up, because a lot of times people in those age brackets are devalued in the workplace, but actually they have tremendous value, and it's a matter of recognizing it in yourself and finding a way to charge appropriately for it. And even though he's taking 50%, he's giving these companies a tremendous boost because they're getting revenue that they lost basically through a mistake, and there's no cost to them at all. So I think people like this they're like the Jesse Owens, they can really expand our minds. Another entrepreneur who I loved his story, Chad Patchkey, who's also a case study in the book, also professional services. And he's a consultant, and he worked in the oil and gas industry. He's from Texas in the United States, which I don't know if you are familiar with all the industries and what states they're in, but Texas is big in oil and gas. And so his job was going in and telling refineries how not to blow up, basically, safety. And it was very important. And he could bill at a pretty high rate. I think it was about $250 an hour. But what he did was, in his field, he knew a lot of mid to late career professionals who were getting kind of pushed out because of what happens in corporate America. So he started a consultancy where he brought those people together, and he would go to the refineries. He had a good reputation in his industry already, and he can bill some of them out at $350 an hour, and he takes a cut in it. And his best consultant, his top consultant, is 75 years old. He gets billed out at $350 an hour. And I thought, wow, isn't that like turning all the stereotypes on their head? He knew the guy had tremendous value. He was the father of a certain discipline in this area of safety, and his name was worth so much, and he knows so much about the subject. So he, instead of going to the usual workers, he tapped an untapped workforce. And these are contractors. They are guys that are in pre-retirement. They don't really want to work full time, but they like him to get the work for them. So I thought that was another really exciting model. And then another new case study that I came across is Jamie J, who, if you are a follower of podcasts, he's done a number of podcasts. One was called Stop Riding the Pine, and now he's doing one that has to do with thinking out of the box in business, but he does custom podcasts. So if you wanted to do your own podcast, you could hire him to handle all the technology, so you don't have to mess around with the microphone and everything else. What he did was he got a team of virtual assistants who are contractors, and they're in the Philippines. They were able to assist him during the time zones that he needs for his clients in the US. And if you hire him, you get a single point of contact there. If you pay him a monthly fee, this one assistant will then talk with everybody else on the team and get you what you need. So if you needed, Elena, a little icon to advertise this on social media, you would tell that one person. She would go to the graphic designer, make sure that the designer created was good enough for what you needed, and then get it back to you, so you don't have to mess around with the whole team. And this caused his business to grow tremendously. I actually profiled him for Forbes when he was at about $300,000 in revenue. And I spoke with him about a year later to just get advice about something on podcasting. And he said, you know, Elaine, those businesses that you write about that are at 1 million, well, I've become one. And I said, what did you do? And that's what he did. He changed his business model where he offered this monthly retainer service, but he's not doing the work. Now, something really amazing happened. He wound up interviewing me on a podcast that he was doing about a week ago, and he had to reschedule it, but I never found out why he rescheduled it. He said the reason he rescheduled it was he had COVID-19, and he was flat on his back for 3 weeks, and he couldn't run his business. Well, he had put all these systems in place with the assistants so that the business ran without him. Even though he's a freelancer, a non-employer business, he had a team, and that allowed him to have an income when he was really sick and not miss a beat. And I thought that's such a powerful lesson, because we can all put systems in place, whether we have contractors or not. Maybe we use automation for certain things, but this is what I'm seeing on the front lines. To just give you some examples, the old freelance model of just doing one project, scrambling up the next project, hoping you can pay your bills. That's not what these 7-figure freelancers are doing. They've had that period where they did that, but then they've grown past it, and they've made sure that their business is running very efficiently using automation, other freelancers, outsourcing in some cases. If they're doing e-commerce, they're not packing up the boxes themselves, they're using Fulfilled by Amazon. And I just feel there's such a wealth of information, and it's a field of business that's evolving in real time. If I have this conversation with Elena in a month, there will be some new things that happened, as I'm sure Elena could tell you from all the different presentations she's had this whole month. So to me, it's very exciting for all of us, because it means that if we choose to, and that's important to us, we can grow our businesses to the size that we need and never have to go back to a traditional job if we don't want to.
This is great, Elaine. Thanks for sharing. The question I have, and I think most of us are thinking, are there specific businesses that have more potential for growth?
There definitely are. Well, in the non-employer statistics, the top category was professional, scientific, and technical services. So that could be an attorney, an accountant, an engineer, usually a skilled professional. It could be a writer, an artist. That's the best category to be in right now, but that could change. Another one is finance. You have a lot of people that go out on their own who have a financial background of some sort. Real estate rental and leasing is another one. That's something that can be done on the side, where perhaps you invest in a duplex apartment and live in one and rent out the other, and then start reinvesting. There was a fellow who was actually a financial planner in the book, Corey Binsfield, who lives in Duluth, Minnesota. That was where he grew up. He had been in San Francisco and he moved back home, and he bought one duplex. And I think the owner had to finance this for him because he was a young financial planner and not didn't have a very large business at that time. Now, when I last spoke with him, I think he had 126 properties, and it eclipsed what he was doing as a financial planner. This is his business, and he loves it. He loves old buildings, and he's in his 50s, quite athletic, and he's always skateboarding and mountain biking and doing things to find new buildings in Duluth, and he knows it inside out. And what was kind of exciting to me is that's not really a hotbed of real estate compared to San Francisco, where he had been living, but it didn't matter. He could be in a college town and still find that kind of opportunity. And maybe the barrier to entry was lower because it didn't cost as much to buy that first property. So that's a hot area. And then retail, e-commerce is a big one right now. It's gotten more competitive since I wrote the book. In the beginning, it was kind of like anybody who got onto Amazon and had a unique niche could do okay. Now there's some issues going on with intense competition, having to pay to be pulled up high in the rankings, which can be expensive. There's some counterfeiting issues and other things. So it's gotten harder. And I think if you were to go into e-commerce, you really need to become part of e-commerce communities and keep up with what's going on so that you actually make back your investment. But one really interesting thing that is newer is sort of print on demand products. I've been finding the last year, I've been finding more entrepreneurs who really didn't have much startup capital, and they're going to sites like Teespring, Teespring, where you can put up a design and sell, say I do yoga, like a yoga shirt that has your design on it, but you don't have to pay to manufacture it. You put up a little store, and then someone can order it through Teespring, and Teespring takes out the cost of producing the shirt and then pays you. So you don't need any startup capital. And I've been seeing a lot of people going into these fields. Of course, you've got to have a good design and product. But I was getting excited about this, and I told my husband, and so he teamed up with one of my daughters who does anime. She's a teenager, and she designed all these designs for him, and they put up a little store. So we're about to start promoting it. And I thought it was so funny because it really resonated with him, because it was so easy and so low risk. Because the worst thing that would happen is you made a design and nobody liked it, but you can put the design on any number of different products. And there were all different types of products you can do this with in different sites. There's like Cafe Press, where if you wanted to do housewares like mugs or things like that. But I'm seeing this a lot with entrepreneurs who don't have access to capital, because manufacturing is a hot category. It's one that I looked at in my book, but that's one, where maybe you come up with something like a protein bar in your kitchen or whatever. You can't manufacture that in your kitchen for health and safety reasons. So you need some money. You've got to hire what's known as a co-packer to pack it up successfully. And you can come up with the money, but it's going to be like $50,000. And I'm not good at conversions. So you can do the conversions on a calculator, but you need some money to do that. Whereas these print on demand programs are really a great way to test the waters and see if you like being a manufacturer. And it's something that can be done on the side to supplement freelancing. That I think is also an important trend, is having a diversified income, because with COVID-19, we saw some businesses that were just wonderful, like being an event planner, are not wonderful during COVID-19, right? So, but yet we saw some people pivoted into other things. One entrepreneur I've interviewed a few times, Alina Shiro, is an event planner, and she has $1 million one-person business in New York, and she pivoted very successfully into online events. And she started doing things like getting celebrities for corporate quarterly meetings and doing experience type things with well-known chefs in New York, and made it really fun. Not everybody can do that. So if you're in a field that's sensitive to disruption, sometimes doing something completely different, like if you're a freelance writer also investing in real estate, could be a way to give your family or yourself income security, so that you're not so subject to whatever is going on in the world, because it's a crazy world right now, right? And it's so unpredictable. Nobody can really predict it. And with all the different elections around the world, who knows? But you do have control over your own business, and exploring other options can be an interesting sidelight for you.
I think one of the speakers said you have to feel comfortable with uncomfortable, and that's the status we are now, right? It's totally uncomfortable because it's totally different. But once we go into business ideas, so first we have the idea, right? And we think all the details. What are the skills and maybe well, I'm talking about soft skills and hard skills we need to have in order to succeed. Have you analyzed that aspect?
Definitely. The one thing that I noticed, I put up a post on LinkedIn about 6 months ago, where I asked people, what would someone need to do if they had to start a business by tomorrow? What is the number one thing they should do? And they basically said, go to your network and ask for advice. And I think that's a great quality. And it's something that I saw with a lot of these entrepreneurs, is instead of being stoic and suffering alone, which a lot of us have been trained to do, they've reached out to other people, not said, I lost my job and I need to start a business, but said, I'm thinking of starting a business as a freelance writer. What advice can you give me? Because then you're not asking people for favors, which none of us likes to do. Like, I need work. Could you give me a project? It's embarrassing. No one wants to do it. But if you ask people for advice, you never know where things will lead. That was actually in my business one of the best things that happened to me my first year in business. A friend who I used to hire as a freelance writer helped me to do an informational interview with a department at my old company, Time Inc., that I didn't really know about when I was there. And while I was in the office, the person who was interviewing me said, Wendy would like to say hello to you. And I said, my brain was kind of ticking through, who do I know named Wendy? And I couldn't remember who it was. So she popped out and I immediately recognized her. And it turned out for years, maybe 8 years, I had done this online newsletter, and she sold the ad on the newsletter. Then every once in a while, she did not close the ad deal by Thursday, the day the newsletter was supposed to go out. And I would just hold the newsletter till Friday. We didn't tell anybody because no one really kept tabs on the newsletter. It was just me. Anyway, she remembered it, and we formed a really good relationship around it. I didn't expect anything in return. It was just the kind of normal favor you would do for a colleague in your office. Well, she had a $45,000 project for me that she gave me then and there. And so right then, my business was off and running, and it kept me busy. every week for a year. I had to go into this client on site, which was a great thing for me at the time because I was still used to working in an office and I was in withdrawal. And so I knew I had that one meeting where I got to go to an office. And it was such a blessing. But we all have these experiences in our past, if you've worked for any number of years, where you were just sitting next to other people who formed an impression of you. And if you treated the other people around you right, you can find them on LinkedIn. Just ask for advice and see what they say. I also got great advice. I remember another editor told me about a newsletter called Freelance Success, where editors who were looking for freelancers would post requests. And I got some work through that. I would have never known about that resource if I hadn't asked for help. And another way to address this is also to look for ways to help the people around you, because whether you're in business for yourself or not, there are always going to be opportunities to help other people. Like you hear about a job opening. If you make it a practice every day to try to refer some of those things to other people, I think it just creates good karma around your business. And that's what I see with a lot of these $1 million one-person businesses. They're not doing it with the hope of any payback or quid pro quo, but in general, they contribute to the community. And I think it comes back to them many times over their generosity.
That's a great remark. I love it. Now I want to shift into, so imagine we have an idea, we started it off and it works very well. How to handle the complexity of growing business when you're just alone?
That is a really great question, Alina. And it's funny because I was doing a pro bono session with someone yesterday. It was a person who was a caregiver, in school, working, had a zillion things on her plate. And what I realized was you really have to break it down step by step and just look at your time realistically. In her case, the number one thing she had to do was, if she was going to start a business, take care of the caregiving situation. She needed backup help on that. So it's identifying the one thing that you can do to move everything else forward. And then it becomes a whole lot less complex. Once that's taken care of, then you can move on to the next thing. So what is the first step for setting up this business? In a lot of cases, it depends on the country, I'm learning, but maybe it's testing the waters, starting to test your offer, reach out to other people, say you've become a freelancer and you'd love advice on, is your offering helpful? Things like that. Just start getting feedback from the marketplace. And some people might say, Philippe, I have noticed, you're a freelancer. I'd love to hire you to write this white paper. And you'll start to get offers that way. Or if you get no answers, you'll find out that maybe there isn't as much market demand and you need to repackage what you offer, because we all have skills that are valuable. If you've worked at all, they've had value in the marketplace, but it's how do you package them for the current realities right now? What do people actually need? And I think there's a lot of new opportunity right now as well. So thinking about that too, like what has changed? And I know here in the US, and I think this is true in Europe also, a lot of people are coping with things not being open. School is virtual, so you have working parents are stressed out. I hired a freelancer because I'm a working parent, and so is my husband, and we have 4 children. And I was worried about online school. And in my yoga class, I overheard one of the students, he's a bodybuilder who was taking the class to stay flexible. He was doing an astronomy program at the schools where he did school assemblies, and he couldn't do it because of COVID. So he was switching to tutoring. And so I said, well, what grades do you tutor? It turned out he does up to 5th grade, and my son is in 5th grade. So we formed a pod with 2 other boys, and he comes to the backyard because socially distancing, that sort of thing. And he teaches them in the backyard. They do science experiments. He even brought his little astronomy dome and they all went inside of it. They were doing bottle rockets, but that's a freelance business. He's really helping me. I can't tell you, my son says this is the high point of his week. And knowing that he's learning something 2 times a week is invaluable to me. And so what am I doing? I'm recruiting more people for the pod because we pay per head for each class so that he can make more money from each session without having too many kids in it. he's meeting a need, basically, right? I had a desperate need because I was so stressed out by my son not learning anything from online school from March through June, that the relief is worth it to me to pay for that. So thinking about that, like, people are under unprecedented pain, and it doesn't have to do necessarily only with children. It could do with elderly parents. It could have to do with situations with work, B2B problems out there. But thinking about where they're really, really stressed out, and where you can come in and save them from that problem, that's a business. And it might happen by accident. You might find that people are just asking you for help with things that they know you're good at. That's often a really good area for finding a business. What do people ask you to do for free all the time? Because there probably are some people who would like to pay you for it and have more of your time doing it. I think probably everybody on this call has something like that, where you're always pressed into service, and you gladly do it and you enjoy it, but more could be made of it into a business.
That's so interesting, because the previous session was exactly about that, finding your passions and values and then turning it into business potentially. So that's very nicely said. But I do want to come back to complexity of business, just to share personal experience. I was approached by a coach who said, you know what, I will turn you into $1 million business. I'm like, yay, fantastic, let's do that together. So then obviously it cost money, but the lesson I learned from that discussion with them, and it was, I think, like 1 hour, 2 hours that we went through the services that they do, it helped me to realize that actually I am not ready for that, even though I would wish to have it, obviously, like most of us, I guess. I'm just not having services that I'm ready to scale up. So before we go into that, in that process, we need to think, first of all, that what can we actually scale up, meaning that we can step out from that process and delegate it to someone, that it rotates in itself, or at least somehow the process is optimized, that you only need to touch point at, like, maybe last conversation with the customer, for example. The schemas can be different. But that helped me to realize that I need to look into my business differently and to deduct that little process that I can delegate to someone to free up my time to do something else.
It's really important. What you're saying is what you want, right? Because just because another person wants $1 million one person business doesn't mean that you want that. Maybe you're fine with a much smaller business. Also, we're talking about revenue, not profit. So it's very possible to have a business with half the revenue or even less and have the same profits as a lot of the $1 million one person businesses. They might make 20 to 40% of that as profits, depending on the industry. So one of my clients says, revenue is vanity, profits are sanity, right? So if you go for sanity, it's really the profit that matters in terms of your overall lifestyle and being able to meet your financial responsibilities. So focusing on profit is important too. The reason I focus on the revenue is because too many entrepreneurs don't focus on it at all. And then they have businesses that are really losing money and they're not sustainable, and they end up having to go back into a job that they don't want to take. So you really do need to have revenue at a certain baseline to live. But once you get past that, how far you grow the revenue depends on a lot of things. I keep my revenue at a certain size because I have 4 children, ages 10 to 16, and I want to be able to do things with them. And I could grow it more. And I have had a period where I did, and then I realized I was cutting into my family time too much. I do work full time, but I don't want to work beyond a certain point. And things are like yoga are important to me. I want a certain lifestyle. I don't want to work at 5 a.m. the way I once did. I like to go to yoga at that time. So it's deciding what matters to you and then figuring out what you need to do to get there. And I think it is a gradual process, Elena. I don't think that for most of the people that I spoke with who got to 1 million in revenue in 1 year were the e-commerce entrepreneurs. And that's because you can amplify advertising that's working pretty quickly if you just throw money at the pay-per-click advertising. But for someone who wants to build a sustainable business, it's more gradual usually. One person in the book, Megan Telpner, is a nutritionist, and she says her business it was an 11-year overnight success. She started out doing clinical nutrition. Then she said, well, let me start adding informational products. So her first product was a PDF file with the 3-day green smoothie fast, which she sold to her email list, which wasn't even a real email list in a CRM. It was like literally the people in her email address book for $10. And it caught on. And so she started adding new things like that. Then she had enough of them that she wound up creating a school called the Academy of Culinary Nutrition. Now, this is years and years into it. She wrote a couple of cookbooks. She stopped doing the clinical nutrition because she wanted to scale her messaging and she couldn't do both. Then she had a little baby. Now he's 3 years old. And she keeps on evolving the business over time. If she stayed at over 1 million, and then there came a point where it made sense for her to hire an admin. And my next book is called Tiny Business, Big Money. I'm looking at those businesses where maybe you need one person on payroll. I'm not against adding people to payroll if you need them, because the business should be serving you and the community and its stakeholders. And if you need somebody to do certain things, why not hire them if legally that's what they have to be? I mean, certain jobs can be done like marketing by a contractor, but other things, customer service, hourly work in most countries does have to be put on payroll. So you don't want to be breaking labor laws when you run your business. So that's what I'm looking at, is those businesses where you do need that extra person or two or a handful, but you still want it to be tiny and have all the benefits that come with not having so much complexity. How could you avoid complexity if you have 200 people? There's no possible way you can. And I don't know what the point is where you get too big to avoid massive complexity, but I think there's a feel to it.